Hi, I'm Tammy Potter, and welcome to the Pregnancy Process Podcast, a show designed to help you navigate the hugely transformative journey to motherhood, where you'll hear the unique experience of experts in this area and the incredible stories of women sharing their conception, pregnancy, and postnatal journeys, so that you can have a healthier, more informed pregnancy. In today's episode, I talk to leading fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum dietitian Francisca Pereira-Scarfo. With a master's in nutrition and dietetics and credentials as an Australian accredited practicing dietitian, Francisca has been a certified prenatal and pregnancy dietitian since 2018. Navigating pregnancy nutrition can feel like walking through a maze of conflicting information. In this captivating episode, Francisca unravels the complexities of pregnancy nutrition and postpartum health. We dive into the often confusing world of dietary advice, where misinformation can lead to anxiety for expectant mothers. Francisca emphasizes the importance of distinguishing fact from fiction, helping listeners navigate common myths about nutrition during pregnancy. From understanding the critical role of personalized nutrition to discussing essential food safety tips, this episode is packed with actionable insights. So whether you're trying to conceive, currently pregnant, or navigating the postpartum period, Francisca's expert advice will empower you to make informed choices for your health and your baby's well-being. Francisca, it's fantastic to see you again. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm really excited for this conversation, especially after our last conversation. So for those of you that are listening to this, if you haven't listened to Francisca's previous episode on conception, I highly recommend you dive into that before starting this one, because it was absolutely jam-packed full of actionable things that you can go ahead and implement straight away. So Francisca, thank you so much for your time today. It's fantastic to have you back. I think the best place to start, and this is just off the back of, you're sitting there, you're scrolling through social media, which so many people do. And I feel like a lot of women these days, they get their content, they get their information from social media. But what that actually opens us up to is getting your information from unreliable, untrustworthy resources and sources. Exactly. So if we can start with the most common misconceptions about pregnancy nutrition that you encounter, and how can women navigate conflicting advice?
I guess one of the ones that hopefully a lot of people have debunked now, but the whole eating for two during pregnancy. So we don't have to eat for two, especially not in the first trimester, but your calories or energy intake, as we call it in Australia, it does increase in the second and the third trimester. And I think we already spoke about that. But yeah, that's one common misconception. So people try to just eat a lot more from the first trimester, still thinking of your three main meals, but maybe then looking at some little snacks in between rather than at each meal trying to have a bigger meal, because you don't need to eat for two throughout the whole pregnancy. Probably the next one is just taking any generic supplement. There are a couple of popular brands out there, so people just take one and they haven't really looked at their blood tests or got any advice on what they're deficient in, and they're just taking a standard supplement and probably not correcting any of those deficiencies, or they might have increased requirements because they're at a certain BMI, so they might need additional supplements, or they're watching, like, I don't know, like you said, someone on social media that's promoting a certain brand, and as health professionals, we can't promote any supplement brands, so we need to be neutral and give that tailored advice. So if someone's promoting a supplement brand, stay away. And then the third one is fish. People seem to just be so scared of mercury because they think it's a toxin and they stay away from fish. But we know that a good source of a low mercury fish, canned salmon, sardines, tuna, prawns, all of those are low in mercury, and they're good for you because they've got the omega-3 fats that are so important for brain development for the baby, and also for mum, so important for like our heart health and just overall reducing that inflammation. So it's got a lot of good fats. So don't avoid fish. Still aim to have two serves of low mercury fish in a week if you can. So those three things, the eating for two, supplements, and fish, I would say.
Great. And do you know what? The funny thing is, I'm glad that we started here because you have literally opened up the door for a number of questions that I have coming up for you. And I think we're going to start with fish because there is so much debate around the safety of certain foods during pregnancy, such as fish and dairy. And then you're talking about eggs is another massive one. So all of those foods that are in that don't eat this category, there's certainly reasons for them. Can we maybe run through a few of those common foods that there's a lot of conflicting information around?
Food safety. Yeah, so food safety in pregnancy, there's two categories. So
Mhm,
we've got the bacteria and then we've got the toxins. So the bacteria is your salmonella risk and your listeria risk.
mhm,
When we're pregnant, our immune system is a bit lower. So you're immunocompromised.
mhm.
And so then it just puts us at increased risk of getting sick when we are exposed to some of these bacteria versus if we weren't pregnant, you might just not even notice if you have something. So that's the first category, the listeria and salmonella. Then you've got the toxins, which alcohol and mercury fall under, and vitamin A. So the toxins aren't really food related. You can get things like liver that's high in vitamin A that we say to not have too much, but it's more the food from the bacteria food group that we need to provide. I usually provide a lot of education on. So that's things like raw fish or runny eggs, they all carry that risk. So any type of raw meat, if it's not fully cooked, it carries the risk of that bacteria. So for eggs, we say to cook it through. If you're someone that likes sunny side eggs, just cook it through, make sure the yolk isn't runny. Sushi, it's the raw fish, but also the rice. So if you're cooking and then not eating something within 2 hours, I would say refrigerate it, especially rice, because that can harbor those bacteria and it can grow really quickly. Yeah, a lot of people think sushi is because of just the fish, but it's actually the rice that can be the issue. So people might mistakenly go and have, I don't know, a tempura sushi, but still have the rice. So it's the rice that is the problem. And then dairy foods would be your soft cheeses. So brie, blue cheese, goat's cheese. So you'd want to have a hard cheese. So think of like your Parmesan, cheddar, tasty cheese, and then just practicing food safety with all of those. So cold foods, always keep it cold, keep it under 5 degrees, and hot foods, always make sure you reheat to over 60 degrees and consume within 2 to 3 days. And I always say to clients, when in doubt, just throw it out. Don't risk it. And then there are other like miscellaneous things like soft serve ice cream, because the machine can harbor the bacteria. It's not clear, it's not clean as often as we'd like it to be. Hummus is another one. The raw sesame seeds carry a salmonella risk. So if you're going to make your hummus, make it without the sesame seeds. Just use the chickpeas and the olive oil.
What advice would
Yeah.
you have for people who are
Mm-hmm.
seeing on social media and in the media,
Mm.
mostly it's social media, let's be real,
So, yes.
people saying that it is okay to eat raw fish and runny eggs and that type of thing. What type of advice would you have for people seeing that when they are pregnant?
Yeah, just to have to look at the evidence. That's the current recommendation, and look at the qualification of the person giving that advice, see how credible they are, and understand that a lot of these social media influencers, I guess we can call them, they provide some support, but they can also spread misinformation like wildfires. Just checking their credentials, go suss out their website, just see what are they qualified to be giving you this advice. And if they're not, and if it just sounds like the opposite advice that you've listened to everywhere else, just maybe ignore that advice.
Mm.
and keep scrolling.
Yeah, it's up to us to be a little discerning about the information that we consume
That's
and
right.
the action that we take from that.
Of
Like,
course. Yeah, you just use our critical thinking skills. Don't just take everything as gospel. It's your baby's health and your health. So if someone's saying something that sounds a bit iffy, just question it.
the other thing that I just thought of as well, and I don't mean
Mhm.
to fear monger around any of this, but
Of course.
what you just said about is your health and the health of your baby. It's so true. I've been working with pregnant women a really long time, and I have a client that I can refer to that got sick. I don't know how she got sick, but she got food poisoning at, I think, 32 weeks into her pregnancy with her son, and she got quite bad food poisoning. And the food poisoning actually brought on her contractions, and she had her son prematurely. So there are reasons for this advice. That is one of them. And obviously, not everyone's going to have that same experience, but there are reasons around that. And to see someone go through that, they got food poisoning and ended up bringing on the contractions because they were so ill and having their son prematurely. There are risks to it. And I guess at the end of the day, what you are trying to say is that risk, and this is what I say to everyone when it comes to pregnancy, risk versus reward. What is the potential risk of doing something that you're advised not to do because of XYZ reason versus the actual reward, or what you're actually, how important is it for you to eat a certain thing?
Of course,
But
yes.
I
And I think a lot of social media is one thing, but just from my experience, I see just in your own circle, like family or friends saying, oh, back in my day, we had processed meat and during pregnancy and it was fine. I'm like, yeah, but back in your day, they also didn't talk openly about miscarriages. It was a taboo topic. And
Mm.
you didn't research has come up in the last whatever many years to provide this evidence so that we can then better look after the future health of our babies and of our mums. Yeah, research is just growing. And yeah, I feel like that type of like unsolicited advice when people, and then you feel pressured because you're in that environment. So you're like, oh, okay, my mother-in-law says this, or my friends are having a glass of wine, maybe it's okay, but it's not.
We've
Yeah.
also touched on a few other bits and pieces here that I really wanted to talk
Yeah.
about, and we'll go in a bit of a loop-de-loop here. But supplements, because you did talk about general supplements, but also immune system, right? So we know that pregnant women are immunocompromised, and one way to help with that could be with supplements. So when it comes to supplements, I know that you can't give us any specific ones because they need to be individualized. But when it comes to helping boost your immune system and what type of supplements you should be looking at taking, do you have any advice for that?
I think making sure your vitamin D levels are in check
Mhm.
because that can affect your immune health and supplementing that. So if vitamin D is low, making sure that you're supplementing that.
Mhm.
And getting those vitamin C rich foods, you probably don't need to supplement that because you can basically have a whole capsicum, and I think that's 5 times your recommended vitamin C for the day, including kiwi, capsicum, chilies,
Mm.
not just your oranges. You can get, if you suddenly have an aversion to oranges, you can get vitamin C from some of those other foods.
Mhm.
I'd say vitamin C and vitamin D for your immune health during pregnancy is an important one to consider, or important ones to consider.
But you'd also recommend that you've had your blood test so you know where all your levels are to make sure that what you're actually taking matches the
That's right. That's
great.
right. Because the supplement, especially for iron and vitamin D, a prenatal would have just a very standard dose. And if you're really deficient, like you're never ever going to catch up to those levels or normalize those levels with what's in a prenatal because your requirements just increase throughout pregnancy.
Mm.
Yes, so you definitely want to make sure that you're basing all of that, or your healthcare providers basing all of that based on your blood test.
Now, in terms of alcohol, because you've mentioned alcohol and having a wine.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think they did some survey or stats and they looked at women consuming alcohol during pregnancy, and I'm pretty sure it's around 1 in 6 women that consume some sort of alcohol during pregnancy. Might be 1 in 4, but I've got 1 in 6 in my head. And yeah, when you tell someone this, they're like, what? But yeah, people do consume alcohol when they're pregnant. And so, yeah, understand, just still checking with clients and asking that question and making sure that they know alcohol is just a no during pregnancy.
So, what are the risks of
Yeah.
drinking alcohol during pregnancy?
It's not ethical to do, making pregnant women sit there and drink, but they probably have looked at the effects of women that have had alcohol during pregnancy and followed that through to see. So there's learning difficulties, there's developmental difficulties with these kids, behavioral problems, and some of these things show itself later down the track. It's a toxin that directly affects the baby. And so it's not fair because the mum has to then give that up. And if that's something that you do as a social thing, completely giving that up for not even just 9 months, because if you think of the preconception phase, then pregnancy, and then if you're breastfeeding, it can be up to, I don't know, a year and a bit that you're not having alcohol. But yeah, it's important. No alcohol, the recommendations during pregnancy.
So the recommendations is 0 alcohol. So it's not that, oh, we were pregnant, just have 1 glass, it won't kill you. Because the reality is alcohol enters your bloodstream, it then enters your baby's bloodstream, and all of those developing, like they're developing their brain, they're developing their neural system. It is a toxin. It does go into your bloodstream, it goes into your baby, and they just don't have the research around what it does. So what it does to me, if I had 1 glass of wine a week during pregnancy, would be totally different to what it does to someone else. So my baby might be fine with me drinking 1 glass of wine a week. Your baby might be, not that I'm pregnant with anyone, so
All these messages after this.
pregnant and I had a glass of wine a day, a week, it might not do anything. Whereas if
That's
you were
right.
pregnant and you had a glass of wine a week,
That's
your
right.
baby might be quite affected by it.
Especially in throughout the whole pregnancy, you shouldn't, but early pregnancy, the baby hasn't developed their liver. That's our way of processing things. So they can't process the alcohol. So that dose, I feel, would just be so potent for a little fetus. And yeah, I think the data says it increases the risk of miscarriages, premature birth, and yeah, like you said, one affecting how drinking 1 glass might be okay for you, but the next person might not be. That fetal alcohol or fetal spectrum alcohol disorder, I think, or fetal alcohol spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
You'll see that later down the track with learning behaviors or hyperactive and communication issues.
I know, especially working in the health and wellbeing industry and being a coach, working with women, training during pregnancy, I know that there are some women that train during pregnancy to help manage weight gain, right? And we know that excessive weight gain is not healthy. Weight gain and the Goldilocks effect is what I call it, because too much is not good. Not enough is not good. It's got to be just right. So you've got to walk the tightrope of you can't have too much, you can't have too little. So how can pregnant women balance the need for increased caloric intake with the risk of excessive weight gain? And I know you mentioned you shouldn't be eating for 2. And I think I can tie this into another little bit here because we're going to talk about morning sickness and stuff like that too. But how do women manage balancing that tightrope? The Goldilocks
Of course,
tightrope.
much of the weight gain, don't try and achieve this specific weight gain because you do need to, if you're, depending on your BMI, there's different categories. So if you're underweight, we usually say aim for 12.5 to 18 kilos throughout the whole pregnancy, with averaging, I think, half a kilo a week from the second trimester. And then if you're in a healthy BMI, The WHO says around 11.5 to 16 kilos, and again, half a kilo a week. And then again, when you're overweight, it's less and less how much weight you should be gaining throughout the pregnancy. It's just about being slow with that weight gain, and from the second from the second trimester, yes, after 12 weeks. Because really, the first trimester, there's not a lot of growth. The baby's still quite tiny, but it's from the second and third trimester where the organs are growing. You've got your placenta, you've got more fluid. And if you're trying to follow those food groups, meeting your grains, having enough protein, getting your vegetables and your fruit, and not having those trans and saturated fats as much, and you're eating some of those more nourishing options, then we're happy with that. Then you're going to gain that weight, and it's likely going to be good weight gain for the baby, and just slow weight gain, half a kilo a week, not just eating for 2 and suddenly you realize, oops, a couple of kilos already, and then just down to the baby. If you don't have any sort of body image or any disordered eating type behaviors, I would say it's okay to just weigh yourself every other fortnight during pregnancy to just keep on top of that. And because I don't think all healthcare providers will weigh you. Yeah, just to keep an eye on that weight gain.
Yeah.
And also, if you're not gaining weight, that can be also an issue, because you want to make sure that from the second trimester you are, because you're growing another little human in there.
We have mentioned the first trimester a couple of times, obviously.
Yes.
First
Yeah.
trimester, you've got morning sickness, you've got food
Yes.
aversion, you've
Yes.
got cravings.
Yes.
Have you got any
Yes.
kind of safe and effective ways to manage these common pregnancy symptoms?
So with food aversions, it's usually meat aversions. I find I get a lot of queries around that. Women that get into the first trimester and just can't stand meat. So then you'd want to look at your meat alternatives. So your legumes, chickpeas, lentils, making sure you're including that. And because we call them like our non-heme iron food sources, you want to pair that with lots of vitamin C to just absorb that iron a bit better. Having more nuts, so having nuts as a snack if you can, just to get that extra bit of protein. If you've got nausea, I feel for you. Small frequent meals, you can try that. Keeping actually like some crackers or popcorn on your bedside table, and then have a snack before like your feet touch the floor. That actually will help. So you better like try and be on top of the nausea before you get sick, basically. And if you really can't manage the nausea and you're not eating or keeping food down, then you would have to try medication. So speak to your healthcare provider and get a script and just take the medication so you can keep food down. And what was the other one you said?
Food aversions, nausea, and cravings.
Cravings, yes. Yeah, cravings, interesting one. So it's probably you haven't had enough either fiber or carbs or not enough protein in a meal. So then you're craving something high in sugar. So just looking at your overall like daily intake and then keeping a food diary. And then the next day you're like, oh, no wonder why I was craving, because at lunchtime I just had a boiled egg and I didn't have any whole grains. And by 3 o'clock I was looking for something to basically pick my mood up. So yeah, making sure you're having like complete meals. So protein, carbohydrates, lots of veggies, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then those snacks in between. And that should curb those cravings. And if you do want some chocolate, it's fine. It's okay every now and then to have those things. But yeah, if you feel like the cravings are happening because you're not eating like a complete meal, then a food diary is a good way to just monitor. So before you go to bed, just spend some time journaling and being like, what did I have today? How did I feel? And then you can make the decision as to what you didn't or did do.
Absolutely. Now, in the pregnancy process program, of course, I have some quite detailed sections around nutrition, one of which are like called eating for survival, because the first trimester, from my perspective, is a little bit like eating for survival, right? So you'll get down what you can. Sometimes you've just got to get through it. But it is interesting. I love a food diary. I think I'm a lot more pro food diary than I am counting calories. I think having that kind of awareness around what you're eating actually, and I know this is like very old school as well, but when I'm working with people around their nutrition, I love them filling in a paper food diary. So you can look at the week as a whole and see where you went wrong, exactly what you're talking about. And you can tell, like when I work with people around nutrition, you can tell if they've not eaten so much one day, then the next day is a little bit like out of whack because they're a bit hungrier.
Yeah, your body's making up for it. It's like,
Exactly, 100%. But I feel like, and I may be talking out of school here and putting it towards
mhm,
other things, not so much pregnancy, but I feel like sometimes
mhm,
cravings are a really good determination of what you're lacking in your nutrition. So I know
mhm,
for me around my cycle, if I'm craving, I don't know, salty foods, or if I'm craving carbs, I feel like for me, that's kind of an indication of what my body needs. So if I'm craving like salty, I actually might be a little bit dehydrated. So my body's saying, I want you to eat something salty so I can hold on some of the water. So I think sometimes if you peel back some of the layers from the cravings a little bit and try and almost just have a think about it. Okay, so I'm craving this. What is it about that I'm craving that my body actually needs? Is it the crunch that I want? Is it the salt that my body needs? Is it the sweet? And I feel like you can probably try and pair that back with other things as well. Maybe think if you can't break it down a little bit, you can think about, okay, so what is it that I'm actually craving? And then look at other things that might satisfy that.
yes, that's right.
Mm,
That's right. That can just being in tune with your body, and that's why the journaling is good because you can reflect and think, oh, okay, I maybe had for lunch. Yeah, like I said before, you didn't have carbs or you had a really low GI, which is a carbohydrate that breaks down so quickly and sends your blood sugar levels up. And then within a few hours, your blood sugar levels drop, and then your energy is depleted, and then
mm,
you just need that next boost. But yeah, just reflecting back and be like, okay, maybe if I put like a whole grain here, it'll give me that sustained glucose, that blood sugar level, and my energy will be like this rather than up and down
mm,
throughout the day. So yeah, food diary, I think it's a really good tool to use. Just a journal. I usually tell people just journal how your day went with your food
mm.
and how you felt.
Well, it just comes back to that. If you're not assessing, you're just guessing, right? So if you're not tracking, you're
Yes.
just guessing. And so anything
Oh my God, you're full of these. I love them.
like, anything that you want to get better at, unless you're tracking
Yes.
it, there's no point.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same. If you wanna
Yeah.
get better at managing your money, you have to write down everything that you spend money on. If you wanna get better at
Mhm.
your time management, you actually need to write down
Of
everything
course.
that you do with your time, like,
What
when
you're
you're doing
doing.
the same
Mhm.
thing, everything. Like, so it can be applied to everything, I think. Now, you did mention meat aversions. So what about for people that actually, again, have dietary restrictions, or like vegetarians, vegans, people that have certain religious reasons why they can't eat certain things? So basically, specific dietary restrictions for various reasons. What would your advice be for women with those to ensure that they're meeting their nutritional needs during pregnancy?
Yeah, I guess so still having those meat alternatives if you're not
Mhm.
having your red meat. And then again, depending on the meat, some people might just not like red meat, but they will have chicken or fish. So, just working with what you can manage. So if
Mhm.
you're happy to have fish, make sure you have that 2 to 3 serves, but still getting that blood test done and supplementing with B12, making sure that if you're not having any meat, you're vegan or vegetarian, you're not going to be meeting that B12, and the blood test will show you that. Most people that I've seen that are vegan or vegetarian, B12 is low. So the prenatal will have to have a B12. You might even need additional B12, and your healthcare provider will tell you. And iron as well, potentially could be low. So yeah, just include those meat alternatives, your legumes, tofu, edamame beans as a snack, nuts. And if it's just a preference, try and encourage, maybe not in the first trimester if it's meat aversion, but then slowly introduce it back in the second and third trimester when you're feeling a bit better.
And then obviously work with someone like yourself that can help make sure that you're actually meeting all the requirements and that you've done the required blood work. Yeah.
That's right. We make it easier for you. We literally just say, give us the blood test. This is how you can meet this. This is what you should be having. So if you do feel like you're struggling, don't struggle alone. Don't put up with that alone. See someone.
We won't go down this track, but from my perspective, if you don't eat certain food groups as a preference, I think
like a fad.
Don't even get me started on keto. But if you're cutting out entire food groups as a preference, as a personal choice for you, I think for a period of time while you are pregnant, I think that could be a time that you maybe rethink your personal choices when there is another human that's depending on you for all their nutrient requirements. And you can pick those up again after. That's my opinion. If someone doesn't like that, I'm sorry, but that's kind of my opinion on that.
I agree. The baby, there's no one to advocate for that child, the baby. You're the number one, you're the primary person. You need to be doing basically all you can while they don't have a voice to give them the best start.
And so in terms of that, what's the long-term impact of maternal nutrition on the child? Actually, let's talk about the mother and the baby. What are the potential long-term impacts of nutrition or incorrect nutrition on the health of both the mother and the baby?
Yeah, of course. So with the baby, things like preterm births, neural tube defects, developmental abnormalities, that's for the baby. For the mum, not meeting those requirements, risk of preeclampsia, risk of gestational diabetes, and then women that have gestational diabetes can go on and have diabetes postpartum, and that's a risk factor for heart disease. Making sure that we're correcting those deficiencies, making sure we're getting the blood test done and correcting any high sugar levels or following the advice of the healthcare professional to not worsen any of those conditions is so important. And I think we spoke about it in the part one where, the nutrition plays such an important role in the epigenetics of the baby, shaping their future health and their risk of chronic diseases. Correct those deficiencies either preconception or during pregnancy to prevent all of these conditions we've just listed.
And then obviously, because we're going to move into postpartum now, but I genuinely know that postpartum depletion is a real thing. And I think so many women actually suffer from it for so many different reasons. If they're not adequately nurturing themselves via their nutrition and their other wellbeing practices, their training, getting adequate sleep, all of those pillars of health during pregnancy, then it carries over into their postpartum period, their postpartum time, and postpartum depletion is a real thing. So if we can talk a little bit more into the whole postpartum area now, that would be great. I think let's start with breastfeeding. What would the nutritional requirements be for someone that's breastfeeding versus non-breastfeeding? And is there any specific kind of nutrients that they should be focusing on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And postpartum nutrition is so, so important. Like you said, the postpartum depletion. And a lot of the times, especially if women have struggled to fall pregnant, they've had a really long preconception phase, then once they've had the good pregnancy, they have the baby, it's almost done. And it's not done. And me included, I'm a fertility and pregnancy and postpartum dietitian. And in the first 3 months, I completely neglected postpartum nutrition because I had a baby that came early and you didn't have time to meal prep and have all those meals in the fridge ready to go. I was so sleep deprived. So postpartum nutrition is so important. We need to prepare for that. If you're breastfeeding, your kilojoules a day, we say to aim for close to 2,000 kilojoules on top of what you're currently having.
And so if you divide that by 4.2, so it's about 500.
Yeah? Yes, yeah, so that goes up. Protein needs have gone up higher than we actually thought. So studies are showing around like 1.7 grams per kilo per day
Mhm.
compared to women that aren't breastfeeding. And then you've got your vegetable and grains food group. So
Mhm.
if you're breastfeeding, we say aim for 7.5 serves of veggies versus 5. And for grains, it's 9 serve of grains versus around 6.
Mm.
So those are, I guess, the main macros, and like the veggies are your micronutrients, but those are the main food groups. So basically, more calories, more kilojoules per day, more protein when you're breastfeeding. I think there's a lot of that I see with a lot of misinformation would be the hydration, just drinking around 750 mils more than what you normally would and just drink till thirst. So
Mm.
when you're breastfeeding, have a drink bottle there and keep drinking. There's no specific number where, I think I've seen you have to drink 2 liters. If you're someone that's taller or you're already exercising postpartum, then you might need more. You might need less if you're not as active. So just listen to your hunger, your thirst cues, and drink. But your nutrient wise, kilojoules or energy per
Mm.
day, protein, your whole grains go up, and then your vegetable food group. So you're having increased vitamin and mineral requirements. So hopefully that veggie food group will hit some of those. But again, postpartum's such a hard time that, how are you going to meet all of these requirements? Who's going to provide that food? How are you going to get this food into you?
Mm.
Those are the things that we need to be planning before the baby comes.
You've mentioned 1.7 grams of protein, and
Mm,
I know how hard it is for people to get
oh,
protein in general. 1.7
yeah.
grams is
Mhm.
actually quite a lot. So,
It is.
again, can we talk about supplementation postpartum? Starting with, can you supplement with protein powders postpartum, or does it go back to the same kind of advice that you gave in conception?
Yeah, I think if you're breastfeeding, I would still be mindful of the additional vitamins that's added to that, because then you don't the vitamin A, if there's any vitamin A in your protein powder. But if you're just having a pretty standard protein powder, it's fine
Mhm.
to add that. But if you can get your protein from whole foods, that's the aim.
Mhm.
So making each meal count with good quality protein, making each snack count with good quality
Mhm.
protein, and having those snacks prepared, having those meals prepared and ready so that you have it there. It's easy, it's accessible. It's when we're just scrambling to find a snack that you're just going to probably pick something that's not going to be high in protein because you just don't have it on you.
And in terms of essential supplements, are there any essential supplements that you'd recommend for postpartum women to support their recovery and their overall health and well-being?
Yeah, so for both breastfeeding and non-breastfeeding mothers, still take a supplement that's got about 150 micrograms of iodine.
Mhm.
And then if you're breastfeeding, you need to make sure you're having food sources of iodine and aiming close to 270 in total of iodine, micrograms of iodine, because when the baby is, I guess, in utero,
Mhm.
it just relies on the mum's thyroid. So iodine helps with those production of those hormones. And if we're not correcting that intake
Mhm.
postpartum, the mum is then at risk of things like hypothyroidism, goiter,
Mhm.
and thyroid autoimmunity.
Mhm.
So yeah, we wanna make sure that we're still supplementing. Keep taking your prenatal that's got, I think usually it will have around 150 micrograms already of iodine, but making sure it does have some iodine.
Mm.
The other thing I would say to supplement for mums who are breastfeeding is choline, because you still can then give
Mhm.
that through the breast milk, and that still helps with the baby's brain development.
Mhm.
And for both mums that not breastfeeding and breastfeeding, continue to take that omega-3 supplement as well.
Mhm.
Again, important for heart health and recovery for the mum.
Mhm.
Calcium, so eating calcium-rich foods,
Mhm.
unless you've been told that you need to supplement because you're vegan or vegetarian and you're not meeting that, or vegan, and you're not meeting that your calcium requirements. But that's important for breast milk production and reducing your risk of osteoporosis. So again, the baby would have just sucked whatever it could from you. So making sure that you're having calcium-rich foods. And then I would say iron and vitamin D again, important, because if your iron is low postpartum, along with that sleep deprivation, it can affect your energy levels, your mood, postpartum depression, and yeah, vitamin D as well can affect your mood, immune function, your bone health. So yeah, those, I guess you probably asked about supplements, but yeah, I just went and stated those nutrients. So iodine, omega-3, calcium, iron, and vitamin D would be the ones to look at.
Choline, I think,
In a,
yeah, as well.
and choline.
So just a question, how many of these can have blood tests related to them? Because I'm a huge advocate of postpartum blood work because, like you were saying, the baby will leach whatever it can out because it really will. It will take what it needs from you and leave you with the remainder. So I think in that postpartum stage, and I've had a conversation recently, and I've got women who are a year postnatal, and they haven't done their blood work. They've got no idea what's going on with their bloods. So, how many of these? Can you check iodine, choline, omega-3, calcium, iron, and vitamin D? I know that you can check calcium, iron, and vitamin D. Can you check the other
The
ones?
calcium, yeah, so you can't check choline.
Mhm.
That's just like an additional
Yeah.
supplement. And you can't check your iodine levels. You can check your levels for your thyroid levels,
Mhm.
so that will give you a good. You can do your thyroid studies, and that will give you an indicator of what your thyroid's doing, and then the doctor might be like, "Okay, you need more iodine, or you shouldn't have too much."
Mm,
Vitamin D and iron
mm.
you can test. The calcium, the blood calcium, is interesting because your body will always try to make sure that your blood has enough calcium, but it doesn't tell you how much calcium it's drawn from your
Bones.
bones to dump into the blood.
Mm.
The best way to check if you are at risk of osteoporosis is do something called a DEXA scan.
Mhm.
They usually won't recommend it for everyone. Maybe if you've had fractures or you've broken a few bones, then it might be a bit of a red flag. And if you're not meeting that calcium, or if you're vegan, then you could push and advocate for yourself and ask your GP for one of those scans.
Strength train.
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone,
Oh, you make sure that you're strength
I'm
training.
just gonna squeeze that one in there. Resistance training, very good for your bones, people. Good for bone health.
Yeah, so true.
So in
Exactly. But
terms
yeah, in terms of like blood
yeah,
work, don't rely on the calcium to tell you about how your bone health is. Make sure you're still having enough calcium, even though your blood calcium says that you're fine, because that doesn't tell you what your bones are doing.
and so in terms of other blood work that absolutely needs to get done postpartum, we've spoken about a few already. What would you recommend outside of what we've already spoken about? Because you mentioned thyroid studies, absolutely iron, vitamin D. What other ones should women, if let's say someone is postpartum, they're listening to this podcast and they're going to go to their doctor and request a postpartum blood work, what other ones would you recommend?
Yeah, I guess depending on what was the issue during pregnancy
Mhm,
and how that was corrected, then you'll just want to make sure postpartum, it's all just repeat some of those. Probably the additional one I would add, maybe if you've had gestational diabetes, just get your blood sugar levels checked again.
mhm,
Yeah, because we don't want that to then develop into type 2 diabetes.
mhm,
Or if it does, we want to know how to manage it.
mm.
So, yeah, adding that blood glucose, yeah, to your blood work. But yeah, iron and vitamin D, I'd say, would be very important because the fatigue, depression, dizziness, shortness of breath, bone loss, all yeah, can be associated with deficiencies with those two. Vitamin B, especially if you've got dietary restrictions and you're not having meat, yeah, you do your B vitamins.
Mm. Mentioned before about how important it is to have meals ready. Have you got any practical strategies for new mothers to help them maintain a nutritious diet, especially that, like you mentioned yourself, you're caring for a newborn that arrived early and you didn't have all your meals in the fridge. So, you were caught out. Like, how did you manage to get back on track and back on top of all of that type of thing?
Yeah, I'm so blessed. I've got a big family,
Mhm.
both on my side and on my husband's side. And both mum and mother-in-law just brought meals. I say to clients, this is the time where we put all of our, I guess, your ego or whatever we call it aside, and you just
Mhm.
call on your village.
Mhm.
If people are asking when they're visiting what you need, always ask them for a home cooked meal that you can freeze.
Mhm.
Don't worry about the baby stuff. The baby sleeps in your room in their bassinet for 6 months, so don't worry about the nursery.
Mhm.
Get your food
Mhm.
in. And of course, start preparing those meals and freezing them during pregnancy if you can. Yeah, I think those two, preparing, freezing meals, and when people are visiting, don't be afraid to say, hey, maybe a home cooked meal
Mm.
with some extra protein.
Have you got any other tricks or tips that you're like, this is really easy and quick to make, try this or drink that or anything like that?
Non-nutritional tip is a baby carrier. That gives your hands a bit of free time to actually make your snacks wearing that baby, so you can actually go and prepare. You could do things like overnight oats as a breakfast option. Prepare that for 5 little jars, chuck that in the fridge. So breakfast, you don't have to worry. Get up straight away and have that. Then you'd have your pre-prepared meals that everyone has dropped off and it's in the freezer. Snacks, keeping things like your Vita Wheats, keeping cheeses in the fridge, hard cheeses that you can just grab some Vita Wheats and put some cheese on there and eat that. Keeping a drink bottle with you all the time, one that you can open with one hand. If you're holding the baby, you can just keep drinking. Yeah, I think those things. So just preparing prior to pregnancy, things like smoothies, making those should be fairly easy. Just blitz something up and drinking that for breakfast, overnight oats, and then those little snacks like crackers, cheese, nuts, fruit, that you can just peel and eat with a handful of
Mhm.
nuts. Yeah, but it is a hard time. For me anyway, it was a very hard time the first 3 to 6 months, I would say. And you're just exhausted, your body is aching. Yeah, you ask for help. You sit there and you care for the baby, and hopefully there's someone that can. I love, in my background is Malaysian, Indian, and in Malaysia they've got, what do they call it? There's a period for 30 days where the women that just had the baby basically do nothing other than just care for the baby. You've got someone that comes and cooks for you and provides you with all the food. All you have to do, and they take and they like wash your baby. All you have to do is just eat, feed the baby, and rest. It would be just so nice to incorporate some of that practice into Western society, whereas here we're very much like we can do it ourselves, and couples are just trying to get through that difficult period on their own.
Mm. Biggest piece of advice is to draw down on your relationship equity, basically.
That's right. That's right. Just get as much help from all these people around you. Don't come and just visit to carry the baby. Bring me food.
They wanna come and have delicious baby cuddles and fill their cup up with that. So I think at the same time, bringing something for you as well. Now, coffee. Let's talk about postpartum coffee consumption, because I know many mums, have known many mums over the years who literally, I think they survive. I think they're, like, held together by caffeine. What is your advice around that? Mm.
There's no, once postpartum, you can have as much coffee as you need, but also it just depends on what that's doing for you. If you're then having too much coffee too late in the day and you're not getting sleep and then you're tired and it's just that vicious cycle, then we want to reduce, because people metabolize caffeine differently. So some people, one coffee a day before 10 o'clock, that's all they need. Someone else might be able to have 4 short blacks in a day and they still just sleep like a baby. If you're breastfeeding, I'd say to stick to the same rules as you would during pregnancy. So no more than 200 milligrams of caffeine, which is I'd say around a shot of coffee plus some black teas throughout the day, or chocolate if you have that, because there's caffeine in that. If you're not breastfeeding, just think of what the caffeine's doing. If you have heaps of caffeine and your heart's racing and you think, oh, I can't sleep, I feel a bit anxious, then maybe just cut back on a couple of cups, or look at the timing, try and have it maybe before 3 p.m. so that you can have a good night's sleep. So it's very individualized with caffeine.
You did mention anxiety in there. There's a lot, like, obviously nutrition can help with so many things, and I think we touched on a couple here. So you've got the mood and energy levels, and you've also got mental health. So can we talk a little bit to that? Because I feel like during that postpartum period, there are such fluctuating energy levels, there are such fluctuating moods, and obviously a lot of them have to do with the hormones and the changes in the hormones that are happening. And then there's a lot of postpartum mental health that needs to be looked at well. So how can your nutrition support all of that?
Yes, great question. Yeah, postpartum, not just to correct nutritional deficiencies, which is very good clinically and help support diseases, but yeah, very important to support the mum's mental health. And supporting the mum's mental health means just better outcomes for the baby then. So the nutrients that we want to look at when it comes to mental health is, first I would look at just for more mood, I would look at your carbohydrates. We want to choose low GI carbohydrates, so just your whole grains rather than high GI carbohydrates, so refined, I guess, carbs we want to avoid. And the reason for this, it affects our blood sugar levels. So we don't want it to fluctuate and go up and down. We want it to have a nice, even level throughout the day because that can affect our mood. Then we've got your omega-3 fatty acids. So they're an essential fat that we only get from our foods, and it's got an important role in brain function, mood regulation, inflammation reduction. And we get this from things like fish, walnuts, salmon, chia seeds, and omega-3 or studies have shown omega-3 can help reduce risk of depression during pregnancy and postpartum. So take your prenatal and continue taking that omega-3 supplement. Then you've got your B vitamins, particularly your B6, folate, which is B9, and your B12. That supports, again, healthy brain function and food sources of those, because you don't need a lot of postpartum. You don't need heaps of those B vitamins, but including dark leafy greens, whole grains, eggs, and legumes. And most prenatals will have the minimum requirements for your B vitamins. And then your iron and your vitamin D affects your mood. So iron, low levels linked to increased fatigue, mood disturbances, depression. So yeah, prioritize those iron-rich foods, beef, lentils. You can get cereals that are fortified with additional iron. And then the last one, I think I just said that before, vitamin D. So again, important for mood, bone health. We touched on immune function. That you mainly can get from sun exposure to sunlight, going out for those walks with the baby in the morning and again in the afternoon, just to get that extra vitamin D. And again, if any of these are low, then you just need additional supplementation rather than just the basic levels. But yeah, those 5 to summarize, carbs, omega-3, B vitamins, iron, and vitamin D.
Amazing.
So there's a pattern.
Yeah,
all of these important vitamins.
100%. Like I was like, it's the same ones. And of course,
yes, the last thing I probably can think of is, not that women straight away postpartum are going to be thinking about this, but once you get sort of 12 months postpartum, most of the time women start thinking about baby number 2. So before that, please correct those deficiencies. Start your prenatal 3 months before trying to conceive again. See your GP, get those blood tests done, and just make sure that the next pregnancy, again, starting on good foot. Yeah, just if you're planning for baby number 2, go back and get all of that. Don't just get into it and try without correcting those deficiencies, because you'll just keep playing catch up throughout the whole pregnancy.
I know that you answered this question. You've kind of already answered this question already, but if there was one thing that you wish all women knew before they fell pregnant or before they had a baby, what would it be?
Last time I said a nutritional one. I guess now maybe more like a lifestyle one. Now that we're talking about sleep, I would say to get help for sleep with your baby. There's lots of different ways to help support your baby's sleep. There's lots of advice out there now, especially social media, guilt tripping parents that want to get help for sleep for their baby. There are people like, I know, where they're like, babies are meant to sleep with you. It's okay if they get up 18 times a night. It's biologically normal, and don't get help because sleep training is bad. But there's gentle approaches. There's people like Infant Sleep Australia that are very like evidence-based, and we used them, and it's amazing. Getting good night's sleep is just, I don't know, it's amazing, and it just helps you, it helps the baby, everyone's in a better mood. So your baby's not sleeping after, I don't know, the first 3 or 6 months, and they're getting up heaps, get help for your sleep and your baby's sleep.
100% I agree with that. And anyone that's telling you not
Yeah.
to that's not fair. So yes, absolutely. No one functions well when they don't sleep. Everyone's patience is
No.
tested. Like sleep deprivation is literally torture. So
It
you're letting your
is.
child torture you if you don't handle the sleep. So absolutely I agree with that. Sleep.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that sleep specialist that we saw, she said that studies show that gentle sleep training or whatever doesn't actually affect the baby because it's very short term. But what does affect the baby is not getting that REM sleep, so that long overnight sleep after, I think it's after 12 months where they should be sleeping, or after around 6 to 12 months where they should be sleeping for longer periods. That can affect their development because then they're tired in the day and they're not learning. So that's not my area, but that's just what she taught us. So yeah, hopefully new mums don't put up, or new mums and dads don't put up with poor sleepers, and get help for that.
Absolutely. And I'm going to do a shameless plug here, because if you're listening to this, I have episodes that are centered around sleep. One is all around the snoo, which is a bassinet. So the bassinet that helps in those early 6 months. So I've done a podcast about that, and also one with a sleep specialist. Head into the rest of the episodes and you can find them. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time. That I think it's been amazing, and there's been so many great takeaways, and you've shared so generously. I've got like pages of notes, and I hope that everyone listening has really benefited from this. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself and Francisca. And if you've got anything else to add, feel free to add it now.
I've just tidied up my 3-day fertility-friendly meal plan, so that's on my website for anyone that wants to go and download a free copy. So it's free.
Amazing.
Go get it.
Great. Absolutely. I even have a look myself. And if you're hearing this message, I want to say a huge thank you, because it means that you've listened to this entire episode. Of course, if you have any questions about the things that we covered in this episode, or want to know more about me or my other projects, you can find me on YouTube and Instagram at The Pregnancy Process. For those currently in their conception or pregnancy journey, you can apply to join my complimentary but private community, the Preggy Training Crew. And you'll find my community application and social media links in the episode description. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, I absolutely encourage you to share it with other women just like you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.